Hey, good afternoon, folks. John Braddock with Mountain Wave Weather. Figured I'd just jump on here a little bit and talk about the things going on. As a lot of you have noticed, snow's falling already. It's about 6, 7, 8 hours early, so as you can imagine, that has some pretty decent implications for our forecast. I can never get that word right. So we'll talk about that a little bit today, but also there's a pretty big severe weather outbreak happening across the Texas Panhandle and Oklahoma. And it's going to be interesting to see how it works. That's all part of this system that's swinging through Colorado. So I'm going to throw this up on the screen here. Excuse me. This is something I posted yesterday. This is the NAM 3K model, and this is basically tracking the progress of our storm system. And as you can see, you got a trough coming through Arizona, coming across the mountains of Colorado. And then watch what happens as it moves east of the mountains. You see kind of a big bubble up there. That's pressure dropping, so that's a low pressure system. If that looks familiar, you may recall a similar kind of look to what people are calling the bomb cyclone of March. The big snowstorms we've had, they have followed this very, very similar track. Now, just because it's doing that doesn't mean it's the exact same storm with the exact same results, but it is interesting that we're seeing a couple of these this year because they're relatively rare. But here we have probably a second or third one, depending on if you counted that one in April, coming along as well. So you can see it swing through Colorado and just get really, really strong pressure drops. I mean, that's explosive cyclogenesis right there. That's what people are calling bomb cyclones these days. So something very interesting to watch. But that's something we'll want to keep an eye on because, getting one of these this late in May is interesting because you don't see them very often. They're very difficult to predict, and a lot of these things are kind of happening for the first time for a lot of meteorologists. I know I haven't seen stuff like this late in the year in my lifetime, and especially with that severe weather down south, it's sort of one of those things where it's very difficult to predict because you don't see it often. You don't see the cold air coming out of the north this late in the year. You don't see all that warm, moist air coming up. You don't see super strong cold fronts with cyclogenesis on eastern Colorado, but that's what's happening. So it makes the tornadoes and stuff down south very predictable in the fact that it's very likely you're going to see a lot of them, and they're going to be nasty, they're going to be big, they're going to be violent. But it makes things a little bit unpredictable in Colorado because we're not used to seeing systems that behave like this late in the year. So, one thing you look at is we're later in the year. It's warmer, the sun angle's higher in the sky. You would expect less snowfall out of this just because of the time of year it's in. And I would expect that too, based on what I usually predict and what I look at in the weather. But then you've got all these models just bouncing off the walls the last couple days, and especially today. Man, the models have just gone through the roof on snowfall. And the logic in you as a meteorologist says, well, models don't predict this stuff very well this late in the year because of the temperatures and the differences over just a couple hundred feet in elevation. But here we are. So I threw all this stuff together a little bit quickly, so my graphics are a little bit rough, but I'll take you on a little tour here of what's going on. This is the NAM model, and it's running from this morning, and you can see the snowfall it has for the Front Range here. Very, very interesting. And then you can see indications of banded snowfall too, and it looks like that's still loading, but I'll let it go. Interesting storm system. Very, very interesting. Let's take a look at the watches and warnings and advisories. If I can get it to load here. So a lot of you have been commenting about the app alerts going off on your phones. We do have a winter weather advisory. That's in effect for the Palmer Divide. So Castle Rock, Larkspur, Palmer Lake, Kiowa, Simla. So basically, generally Douglas County above 6,000 feet and Elbert County above 6,000 feet as well. So those are your areas. And as you go further south, El Paso, Teller counties, those are included. The pink area down here, that is Pikes Peak. So Pikes Peak's under a winter storm warning. The top of Pikes Peak could see potentially up to 2 feet of snow. So that's one thing that we're looking at. And it was interesting because last night the National Weather Service was talking about this, and they were saying, well, it doesn't look too interesting. We might throw a winter weather advisory up for the Palmer Divide. We might not. And then they're like, okay, we're looking at it. And then early this morning, they're like, nah, no big deal. We're not going to worry about advisories. And then, they throw this thing up, and kind of unexpectedly, I wasn't looking out for it. So it just gives you an idea of kind of the uncertainty that goes around the storm. So, anything can happen. And we don't see storms like this very often this late in May, so it's very difficult to predict. Again, logic for me would lie on the conservative side because it is so late and it is so warm. But a storm this powerful with this much moisture, and especially the fact that it's already snowing, and it wasn't supposed to start snowing until about 6 to 9 p.m. tonight, kind of throws the earlier forecasts out of the window. So one thing I will be doing this afternoon is putting a new forecast together with all this information. But it's very interesting. So one other thing I'll show you is the accumulated snowfall forecast for the Palmer Divide. This is the Weather Prediction Center. This generally overdoes snow. So when you look at stuff like this, you say, okay, Elizabeth, Parker, Castle Rock, Larkspur, Palmer Lake. I'll just throw a couple of numbers up here. Even Denver, Aurora, Byers. When you see stuff like this, it tends to overdo it. So you look at this and say, okay, this could be, 1 to 2 to 3 inches on grassy surfaces. So no big deal there. Just like the last couple of storms, it might, get some road slushy here and there. For the most part, we're not expecting, big major travel impacts out of this. The mountains are a different story, man. If you're going up here, I hope you're already through there, or I think I-70 is already closed actually due to this. But as you get up to the mountains, you're looking at, Winter Park, Fraser, Montezuma, Silverthorne. I mean, all these areas right along the Palmer or the Continental Divide, they are well over a foot of snow. Look at Vail, Minturn. You're pushing 2 feet of snow up there. So big, powerful storm. Lots of snowfall anticipated, especially for the mountains. The reason the models are lower down here is because of that elevation. So that came out this morning before all this new information's come in. The problem with this model, if you want to call it that, is it only runs, I believe it's 12 hours a day. So 6 a.m., 6 p.m., stuff like that. So it gets behind. But what I've looked at here is if this is the 50th percentile. So this is basically, what we would expect if everything went well, everything was on target, forecasts look good. This is what we would expect. Let me bump this up to the 75th percentile, which is basically less likely according to this model. But if the storm should overperform with a lot of the models, this is what you'd be looking at. So again, take these numbers a little bit with a grain of salt, because I don't think it's especially going to materialize for lower elevations. But when you look at some of the higher elevations in Douglas and Elbert County, you're looking at some decently significant snowfall. And when you've got totals like this in the 5 to 10 inch range, depending on how hard and fast it's falling and how quickly you can cool those roads off, you might start to see some travel impacts with that. So I would especially be watching out for slushy roads tonight, overnight, along the Palmer Divide. I don't think it's going to get super bad with the data I'm seeing right now, but definitely enough of a headache where, get off the roads and just save yourself a bit of a bother this evening. So again, this model likes to overperform. So I take it with a big grain of salt. But one thing I will show you that's interesting, let's go to this, give me 1 second to set this up. And there we go. Let's go to this browser view here. This is the Euro. This is the Euro 24 hours. So in the next 24 hours, so you're saying through about 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon, notice the snowfall totals this thing has on it. And the Euro is one we pay attention to. It tends to be one of our more accurate models. But you definitely see a bullseye over the Palmer Divide. You even see decent amounts of snowfall accumulating in Denver. So that's one thing to keep an eye out for. Let me zoom in a little bit on that, if I can. There we go. It's got a lot of the Palmer Divide areas, in that 5 to 10 inch range. So the winter weather advisory that came out was for 5 to 10 inches. I think if Castle Rock or areas right around 6,000 feet see anything in that range, it'll be on the low end. I still don't see the temperatures cooperating enough to get a really big snowfall event for them at this time. Again, this storm is very fluid. It's changing. Right now, if I had to give you a range for Castle Rock, I like the 3 to 6 inch range. So a lot of people have been asking for their specific areas, what we're looking at for snowfall. Anything around 6,500 feet. I like that 3 to 6 inch range. Now, if you'll notice over here in Elbert County, you've got some 7,000 plus foot areas, and I'm at one of them. I'm at about just under 7,100 feet where I am in Elbert County now. You're pushing 10 inches up there for some of those areas. So, I'm looking out the window right now. I've got about an inch on the ground already. The snow is fairly moderate. I wouldn't say it's heavy, but it's coming down decently. It's accumulating on our driveway, it's accumulating on our roads, but again, we're not paved out here, so that's what we're looking at. But it is interesting that, you know, when you look at some of these, like the Weather Prediction Center, it is bumping those snowfall totals up a little bit. So if you're in Elbert County, especially closer to the western area, you know, that 5 to 10 inch range is in play, especially if you're at or above 7,000 feet. I really think those areas have the best chance of realizing that 5 to 10 inch range. Areas below 7,000 feet, like your Castle Rocks, your Parkers, you know, anything in that area, your Highlands Ranches, I like the 3 to 6 inch range better right now. So again, this is going to be a fluid forecast. I'm probably going to have another update tonight. I'm out kind of late, so if I do a video, it'll be later in the evening. It's usually around 10 o'clock-ish, somewhere around there, depending on, you know, how long it takes me to get back home if the roads start to get going. So, but yeah, very, very interesting. And then when you go back and look at this Euro here, it actually has a second wave coming through. So let me see if I can knock this up a couple hours further here. There we go. 48 hour. Bear with me just 1 second here. So here's the 72 hour. I hope everyone can see that. Yeah. So this is 72. It actually has a secondary wave of snow coming through tomorrow afternoon and the evening. So bumping those totals up just even a little bit more. So this is a Euro. This is one model. There's a couple others we'll take a look at too, just to give you some context. But it's like I said, this is such a tricky forecast because the models are screaming snow, snow, snow. But this late in the year, they can do that, and they have trouble with the temperatures. So if the temperatures are warmer, you see a lot less. Already we're colder than we are forecast to be. We're already seeing snow 6 hours in advance. So this kind of makes me lean a little bit more towards these models might verify. So something to keep an eye on. Let's take a look at a different model. This is the NAM 3K. Let me check. This is through about 6 a.m. Tuesday morning. So make sure everyone can see that. 6 a.m. Tuesday morning. This is a different model. So as you saw, the you know, the Euro was right about in this range as well. So you know, if you're looking at Castle Rock, you're looking at that 6 inch. So again, right in that 3 to 6 inch range. Maybe take an inch or two off just for the melting and for the accumulation getting packed down a little bit. But it's still right in that same area. So that's what's interesting about these models. They're really bumping up the snow lately. And, you know, the meteorologist in me says, well, do I believe that or not? Because, you know, these spring storms can really throw these models for a loop. So with that in mind, I'll be adjusting a forecast. I'll have a post up probably right after this video, but you know, a lot of people are asking for specific locations. If you're Douglas and Elbert County below 6,000 feet, especially towards the west, I like the 3 to 6 inch range. If you're higher elevations in Elbert and Douglas County over 7,000 feet, that 5 to 10 inch possible, that range is doable. I think it's very doable, especially with the fact that we're seeing snow already. I'm at, like I said, just shy of 7,100 feet. I've already got an inch on the ground, and I've got at least moderate snow falling right now. So one thing to look at. A couple questions, a couple people from Kiowa. Yep, Kiowa's out there. Kiowa could see that 5 to 10 inch range. It's possible. I would, with what I'm thinking right now, I think it's a little bit lower on that range, so closer to the 5 to 7 than maybe the 8 to 10. But again, like I said, keep an eye on the forecast because this thing is changing almost hourly at this point. Parker, 3 to 6 inch range for that as well. Parker's just right around 6,000 feet. Some areas are a little higher, some areas are a little lower, depending where you are. The lower you go, the less snow you're probably going to see out of this. But one thing to keep an eye on, very, very interesting. Let's go back here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the severe weather stuff that's going on. And I know, you know, mainly I talk about Colorado weather, but obviously this is a big storm that is impacting Colorado as well. But it's also kind of a historical storm system. It's very, very, very strong. You've got very, very cold, obviously, air coming from the north, clashing with warm, moist air from the south, and then you've got a dry line on the back here. That is just perfect conditions for severe thunderstorms. So Storm Prediction Center has issued a high risk for severe weather, and in a lot of cases, this is already kicking off. I have the Weather Channel on behind me, and they're the tornado on the ground in Texas, so storm chasers are going nuts down there. I'm seeing storms all over the place. I'm seeing tornadoes all over the place. So far, I'm not hearing a whole lot of damage reports or anything like that, which is good. Hopefully everything stays out in the rural areas. But what I'm more concerned about is, some of the major metropolitan areas. You look at Oklahoma City. So if you're looking at, Oklahoma City, Edmond, El Reno, any of these areas, you definitely want to be very, very weather aware. I think a lot of places have closed down. The businesses have closed, the government buildings, and I think the schools let out early, which you might think is a little extreme, but in this case, if this verifies, which there's a lot of indications it will, it's an extremely dangerous situation for severe weather and tornadoes. So let's look at the tornado probability. So this is basically your probability of seeing a tornado within 50 miles of your location, I think is roughly how they do it, or I might be thinking of the Torcon on Weather Channel, but roughly. The scale I have on here that I painted is a 2 to 30% probability. This area right here is a 45%. To give you an idea, you don't see that very often, so I didn't even put it on my graphic. So that's something I may have to do. But you don't see these a lot. So 45% chance, if you pick a spot, say like right here where the O is in Oklahoma City, you're looking at a 50-50 chance you're going to see a tornado near you today. And not only that, the tornadoes are going to be very violent, very long tracked, very, very destructive. So the National Weather Service has used some pretty strong language around this one. I would recommend, if you have friends and family in these areas, definitely, give them a shout. The weather is already starting to kick off down there. Give them a shout. Make sure they have, a plan where to go. Violent tornadoes are survivable, but you have, potentially less lead time, and you have less room for error. So if you have a storm shelter, you need to be in that thing well before that thing hits. If you've got, a EF4, EF5 tornado, they are survivable, but, they're most survivable underground. Hiding in the closet doesn't work very well usually for those. You need to be underground for those. So anyway, I've just thought I would post that because it's very, very interesting. It's kind of a historic storm. And the fact that all the stuff we're seeing, so here's your severe weather warnings and tornado warnings. This is not a typical storm that we see this late in the year with all these ingredients coming together. So it's very, very fascinating to watch from a weather standpoint, but it also makes it kind of unpredictable. So you can see a lot of this moisture coming in. Low is establishing right down here in southeastern Colorado. So as you saw in that video earlier, it's going to swing up kind of across the border here, and as it does that, it's going to continue severe weather out and head in front of it in the warm sector. Behind it, you've got a cold front coming through up here, so that's where you're seeing the snow and rain around Denver. You're going to see cold rain out in Kansas as well. I don't think they're going to see a lot of severe weather just because they're on the wrong side of that front, but anything where that front is coming together down in Texas, down in Oklahoma, that's one thing you'll definitely want to watch out for. And I'm going to check this is the day, let's go to the day 2 for the Storm Prediction Center. So as you see, when that low moves off, all that warm air and that warm sector is going to kind of continue out. So you might actually see warm air resurge back into Kansas and up into Missouri and Illinois here. So not as high of a risk for severe weather tomorrow, but an enhanced is definitely something to pay attention to. Again, friends and family in this area, we always watch areas around Springfield and Joplin or whatever this time of year because you can get some nasty stuff out there. So anyway, so I'm probably going to jump off here and get a new forecast updated here. I'll bring that snowfall back up for you just because it's interesting to watch. Again, this is updated this morning, so it's a little behind, but I got a couple people asking for some of the snowfall. So this is the Weather Prediction Center thing from this morning, and again, it's a little behind, but this is what we were expecting this morning. So as I discussed earlier, the models are way, way above and beyond this. So if we take the 25th or 75th percentile, so normally this would be, what you'd expect that the storm overperforms. You can notice that the numbers shift up quite a bit. And I would especially be watching these areas right around the Douglas-Elbert County line that are above 7,000 feet. You guys have the best chance for getting that 5 to 10 inch range realized. As you go further south, it's just really going to depend on your elevation. So, Palmer Lake, definitely, I see you guys in that 5 to 10, probably in the lower. Same thing with Larkspur. Castle Rock is 3 to 6. Parker's probably 3 to 6 in those areas. So the winter weather advisory itself does not include these areas below 6,000 feet in Douglas County. And same with Elbert County. As you get further away, you're not going to see a lot of snow out there. But as you go south, Black Forest will be right on the cusp there. Calhan, lower amounts there, mainly just due to elevation and the energy of the storm. Colorado Springs might see a couple inches out of it, but Pikes Peak's right around here, so they're under a winter storm warning. They'll probably see 16 to 22 inches, somewhere around there, depending on how they end up. But these areas like Woodland Park, Green Mountain Falls, I mean, you're pushing a foot down there. So if you're in the foothills west of Colorado Springs, or if you're in the foothills west of the I-25 corridor in Douglas County, you could be pushing that 1 foot mark. So something to keep an eye on. Like I said, the models are going nuts over this, and I don't know if I buy it just yet, but you sort of have to prepare for what could happen. And like I said, the storm is so unpredictable. It's not something we usually see out here this time of year. So keep an eye on it. I'll throw the weather watches and warnings up one more time. Tornado watch I have up. That's mainly down in Oklahoma and Texas. So like I said, those are what they call PDS tornado watches. They're called particularly dangerous situations. They're kind of like the highest level of a tornado watch, if you can imagine that. You've got a normal tornado watch, and these are a PDS watch. So it means the National Weather Service is extremely concerned about people down there. Closer to home, like I said, we're not going to be dealing with tornadoes, but this winter weather advisory kind of popped up at some point this afternoon. Mainly includes Douglas County and Elbert County over 7,000 feet, or 6,000 feet, excuse me. They're calling for a 5 to 10 inch range. I really think you're only going to hit that if you're above that 7,000 feet mark. So, like I said, kind of right along that Elbert-Douglas County line, and now out into the higher elevations of Elbert County. 5 to 10 inches is possible. Like I said, coming down pretty good here. So we'll see how it goes for the night. All right. Like I said, if you're going through the mountains, travel's going to be nasty out there. I wouldn't be going up there. I think a lot of the highways are already closed. Some of those areas are going to get 2 feet right around the Continental Divide. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then down here, like I said, if you have friends and family, just tell them to be extremely vigilant down here. This yellow is the PDS Tornado Watch. There's one in Texas. There's one in Oklahoma. If you're in and around Oklahoma City, you want to be very, very careful. You want to be, like I said, have your plans ready. You already have a tornado warning just north of Oklahoma City, it looks like. So severe thunderstorm warnings are all in red, tornado warnings are in purple. So you can see there are a ton of tornadoes spinning up down here. So if you got people in those areas, friends or family, make sure they are well prepared and ready for shelter on that. So I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks everyone for watching. I know there's a few questions that I can wrap up here, but some people are asking about the northern areas north of Denver. This storm's not going to be great for you guys. It's really going to depend on your elevation again. Fort Collins is pretty low. Loveland, so maybe 1 to 3 inches if you can eke that out. You might be closer to the lower end on that, but again, it's just going to depend on what the storm does. If we bump that up to overperforming, if we think the storm overperforms, you're looking at 1 to 3 or 3 to 5 if these all verify at higher amounts. So I would go with that 0 to 2 inch range for you guys for right now, unless we see more data that this is, could possibly verify. But it's one of those things where we have to keep a close eye on the models. Out of curiosity here, let's go with one more model I want to look at, and I haven't pulled it up, but it should be interesting. This is the High-Res Rapid Refresh. This model is updated pretty much hourly at this point, and tends to lock onto those short-term changes a lot quicker than some of these other models do. So let me load the last full one up here, and then let's check total snowfall accumulation through. Let's see, this is noon on Tuesday. So let me check to make sure everyone can see that. Let's go up a little bit. It's a little tough in this browser window. So this is the High-Res Rapid Refresh model. It's a short-term, relatively accurate model. It does better with winter weather, I think, than like severe thunderstorms. and thunderstorm weather. But interestingly enough, it's got a pretty good bullseye painted over the Palmer Divide. So, you know, if you look at that entire winter weather advisory area and say anyone in there can get 5 to 10 inches, you know, Douglas County, Castle Rock, it's possible you guys can make that. If you look out in Elbert County, you know, this model shows very, very different result than that Weather Prediction Center. It basically has a huge splotch of heavy snow over Elbert County, and judging by the colors out there, I mean, you're pushing a foot. So that's very, very interesting. That's what we're gonna have to watch. The high-res rapid refresh refreshes every hour, so we like to look at it to see if that is maintaining that trend or if it's not. If it's not, then you know, okay, well, maybe we're leaning towards the forecast going one way or the other. If the trend is continuing, which it is with all these models, you know, it's something to watch out for, because then you're starting to see more verification. So what I'm looking at here is a very nerdy weather thing. It's called a skew-T diagram. It actually helps us chart what the atmosphere is doing, and this is a model. So this is what the model thinks the atmosphere is going to look like at this time. And for me, it's just something I can look at as far as, you know, we've got a lot of moisture. We've got winds kind of out of the northwest, which is interesting. You would think, you know, northwest for a lot of places is downsloping wind, but in our case, along the Palmer Divide, it can actually be a bit of an upslope, so that can enhance your snowfall. So very, very interesting. And I think, you know, at this point, a lot of the snow might be done. Maybe that's why I'm seeing the northwesterly winds. If I go back here a couple hours, let's take a look. Let's go back a couple hours, and then I'll stop bugging you. Yeah, still northwesterly winds, so that's something to look for. A little bit of wind shear down here. Yeah, that's interesting. And then, you know, one thing we look at is we look at the wind profile aloft. The winds are relatively high up here. So, you know, if you've got a thunderstorm day, you look for this for supercell thunderstorms for severe weather. Interestingly enough, we look at this during snow events to see what the winds are doing aloft, because when you have winds coming over the mountains at high rates of speed, they can kind of create a mini low pressure area, and it can actually enhance your upslope. So you get a lot more lift in the air, you get a lot more snowfall, and you get a lot more accumulation depending on your temperatures. So anyway, I will leave it at that. I'm going to do another forecast. I'll have it up on my webpage. There's a likelihood that later tonight, like I said, maybe around 10 or a little bit after, I will do another video update, because we should be well in the thick of the heart of the storm at that point, and we should have a good idea with some of the models if they're going to jump way up on snow, or they're going to stay where they are, or they're going to go way down. So might be worth keeping an eye out, and I'll just kind of be posting little stuff throughout the day as I see new data coming in. So hope everyone has a great day. If you have any other questions, shout them out. Like I said, I'll have another video tonight, and I'll try to answer some of those throughout the day as I can. Otherwise, stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye.